Okay. I didn't announce in advance that I was going to be here. Supposedly I have one viewer. My intention is to try to enjoy the language jam, JT's langjam today. Thanks. Glad you like the work. So this is a little bit new for me. I haven't done streaming before. And I'm trying to see what I can do with the langjam. So for those who haven't seen what it's about, maybe I should do some intros later anyway. But what we're looking at here is, let me see about showing the desktop here. So it's partially blocked probably by that chat window. I have it set up to line up well with the editor. We're looking at JT's langjam, which has a theme today, or this first time around, of first class comments. So I had some ideas of what I might try doing for this. And that was not the kind of theme that I expected. So I'm going to see what can be done here. So I guess you're on mobile then. The trick is I need to be able to see what I'm doing also. Let's see how this goes. Is that better? Probably hard for mobile in any case. Hello. So what I'm trying to do here, oh good, glad that's better now. I'm going to attempt to get some work done for the language jam, JT's langjam today. And I'm not necessarily the fastest coder in the world. And I'm not fresh on even making my own programming languages. So we'll see how this goes. So the theme for today is first class comments for this langjam. And I only have a few hours to do things total. I have a few hours tonight. Maybe I'll have a few hours tomorrow. Most people have 48 hours. I'll probably spend more than the 3 to 5 I think I'll have to spend. Okay, yeah, I'll need at least some amount of space to be able to do any coding. Hopefully this is, yeah, good enough. Both of you seem to think it is. That's good. So anyway, I'll give a start up here on what I'm trying to do. So again, the theme is first class comments, and we'll have to discuss some of what that means in a minute, which is, of course, pretty crazy. I wasn't sure what the theme was going to be, and I wasn't expecting that. That was not the theme that I would think anyone would come up with. JT has lots of programming language experience, like professionally and in research, which I don't have. And so they know what they're doing, and they had fun with this theme. Let me add this to get ignore. Okay. Add that in here. Okay. Oh, that's not the right place for get ignore. Let me get rid of that. Delete file. I have a sub get ignore here. There we go. So anyway, what I did in advance was get a little bit of a setup here. In order to participate, you have to fork the main repository that they have. me see if I can center this better. And then you've got to start your work from there. And so it doesn't matter what tools you use, although I might have broken the rules a little bit because I'm planning to use Python 3.10, which is not released yet. And so it's not easy to install, so whatever. I don't care about whether I win here. Like I said, I don't have many hours anyway. But the intent is to see what I can get done with the time that I have. And so what I said I'm going to work with, again, is Python 3.10. And my hope is to compile something to Zig and use Zig to run it. And one of the reasons I'm using Python is because, while obviously I have fun with lots of languages, the language I use most for me today is Python. And if I need to do anything in a jam, I need to have something that I'm very familiar with. And so that's good for Python. The second thing is that Python has a nice built-in parser. And I don't want to have to write my own parser because I can just short circuit it. So I will not be inventing my own syntax today. One way to avoid inventing your own syntax, of course, is to use a Lisp style syntax. But instead, I'm going to use a Python parser that's built in, get an AST directly out of it, an abstract syntax tree, and therefore skip the parser entirely. So here's what I added after the original stuff. I decided to use poetry, and it's going to be hard to see the stuff here. Let me move that chat window over to the side a little bit here. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Chat window over to the side for now, and get rid of this thing. And so don't worry about notes there. Let's close this down. Okay, so I decided I'm going to use poetry, which I actually haven't used before. I'm in an environment usually where I don't necessarily have a lot of choices with the tech I use. And so, but I decided I'd rather have a TOML file. I don't need the lock file. I'd rather have a TOML file than a setup.py because, and there's other options I know, but I've heard good things about poetry. I decided I'd try it out. And then beyond that, I have a directory structure here. Oh, and the language, I just called the team name / language Ajo for now. Ajo is Spanish for garlic. And it's a nice short name. Anyway, and so I just have a simple directory structure here where I have an Ajo package, where I have an init to say I have a package. I have a main that just calls main. And over here in main, this is how I usually structure my Python executables, although there's some fancier libraries out there, where I just do my argument parsing in main, then I splat out my arguments to a run, and then the run can sort of live on its own. And we'll maybe get more organized as we go. Beyond that, I set this all up last night without knowing what the theme was going to be. And I also have set up for PyTest here. Yeah, stupid thing. Which also I'd heard good things about, but I had not used before. And so I'm using PyTest here. And so between poetry and PyTest, I can do things like poetry, run, PyTest. Oh, you're probably covered by the chat now, aren't you? Let me move the chat window over again to the other side, since you probably won't need to see my directory structure most of the time. Go away. Let's move this a little bit further over to maximize our space. That's good. Oh, very nice. Uli, I don't really know where people are from. ¿De qué parte de México es usted? ¿De qué estado? Oh, the stream? Okay, so the stream I'm planning to do some language jam. JT's language jam. I posted that in my community page a little while back. You can find the links over there. And we'll see how far I get. So anyway, I showed that I have PyTest set up running through poetry. Cancun, Quintana Roo. Oh, you're in Miami now. Okay, cool. Oh, how nice. Dos Mexicanos. Long ago, I lived for a short while in Guatemala. I have actually, And right now I live in Arizona. I'm not, thoughts on OCaml. I think OCaml is a great choice. If I had time just to have fun, OCaml might be a much better choice than Python. Oh, cool. I have never been anywhere near Syria. Even longer ago than Guatemala, actually visited very briefly Eastern Europe. That was on a school trip. And I visited a number of countries, including the Soviet Union. So I've been to the Soviet Union. I've been to Ukraine SSR back when it was Ukraine SSR. But that's probably the closest I've been to the area of Syria. That was a long, long time ago. Okay, Belize. Anyway, yeah, but back to the question on OCaml. Yeah, OCaml is a great language for writing compilers, obviously. And I just don't, well, I have fun with like a lot of languages on my channel, like I was saying. I don't easily, it's not easy for me to use OCaml quickly. As far north as it gets, huh? As far north as it gets, I would imagine you're talking like northern Sweden or Norway or Finland or something. Or maybe somewhere in northern Canada, I don't know. Maybe northern Russia. I'm trying to guess where you might be when you say as far north as you get. Anyway, so let me actually try to get some code here. So I'm going to point out that I am planning to just hijack Python syntax for a language. And the theme for today is, for this jam rather, is first class comments, which of course is sort of a ridiculous theme. And I think that JT knows that. They have lots of experience in programming languages, and they know that the idea of first class comments is sort of ridiculous. I had thought someday, I saw that I was at work earlier today, and I saw the theme, and so I had it in the back of my mind and took some notes and thought about what could first class comments mean. And of course, usually first class, well, not just value, but first class functions are functions you can pass around. A first class citizen, and you can actually go check first class citizen in program. There's a Wikipedia page on it. But meanwhile, the idea of a first class comment would suggest that the comments live as values in the language, which is sort of odd because the point of a comment usually is that it has no impact on the behavior of a program. So if it has no semantic impact, why would you want to have it as a value? And also the point is to make a language here, just pasting on some interesting comment features and the language behind it has no relationship to that sounds boring also. But I presume he meant you could possibly do a little bit of play on words. First class could mean, top notch or something that's like really awesome. So first class comments have really great support for comments in the language. I'm sure they might have been meaning that kind of fun thing. And of course, there's different things you could talk about comments. There's the comments and normal things that in your code where you discuss stuff has no semantic meaning except to the humans reading it. Or you could have comments from other people. People making comments about the language, or people making comments about code. Sort of gets meta here. So I was just thinking it'd be funny if you actually have external comments that show up as values inside of the language. Going off crazy ideas here, and I'm not going to go too crazy today. But the craziest idea I think I had so far was you could have your data be a Google document and your comments on the document, you put in the comments, those have meaning. And so you have the first class comments, meaning the comments themselves actually carry the semantics and the document is your data in some kind of template format. I'm not going to play that game, but that could be a different kind of language. Also, alternatively, what happens if your get commit messages have semantic value? That sounds sort of creepy. Also, you could just say, if you're looking for top-notch comments about your language, your goal is just to make the best language possible, which clearly is not going to happen in 48 hours. Yeah, so I see the comment there about the common Lisp embeds doc strings and functions, and you can query them at runtime. Yeah, I haven't done a lot of Lisp, but I can believe that. Similar thing happens in Python. So, for example, if people get on my case about not doing Lisp a lot on my channel, actually, I'm sure you all have noticed that. So, for example, you can say, hi, there's our doc string in Python. And in fact, speaking of issue of comments that are first class, if you go back to that video I had a little while back about multi-line strings, I did a lot of relationships between comments and strings in that video, and that was on purpose. And I'll probably hijack that notion some today for this. So we go to IPython here and we say from aho.main import main. We say main dot, I think it's doc. Yeah, doc. Hi. So there's an example how I can query my doc strings at runtime, not arbitrary comments. And in fact, we see when we'll be parsing the code here using the AST module that's built into Python, that we won't actually have access to the comments at all. So we're definitely going to have to live in string land. And yes, I should spend more time in Lisps. It's something that I guess I like syntax. Since I like syntax, I don't naturally lend toward Lisps. Although, alternatively, one of the great things to do with a language jam like this, if you don't want to spend time parsing, another alternative to using someone else's parser or a parser generator is just to use a Lisp style syntax. So your syntax is minimal and you can focus on your semantics. But in any case, though, let's close down the PyProject TOML. I'll show it quickly. Messed that up. We have minimal dependencies. For now, again, Python 3.10. And I'm using 3.10 for a reason, because Python 3.10 has pattern matching. And going off, for instance, the OCaml comment, it's like, who wants to process an AST without pattern matching? Well, you can, but it won't be very fun. So I purposely using, and it's a release candidate. It's Python 3.10 release candidate 1. Hasn't formally been released yet. And I'm using setup tools for access to package resources in order to load up files nearby, minimally for testing. I'm not sure if I'll use it otherwise. And PyTest I'm using for running testing. Usually I've just used unit test because it's built in, but PyTest is a more straightforward system. Not anything fancy with it. I've barely used PyTest before. But it's straightforward for the basic tests, and so it'll be fun. Anyway, that's what I'm using for dependencies so far. I'm going to try to keep dependencies to a minimum. And I also have Zig ready. My goal is to compile to Zig and run it with Zig, which means I'll have to worry about things like memory management and the stuff I'm sitting out. I'm probably, well, we'll see what I get done. I'm not necessarily the fastest live coder here. I haven't done a lot of streaming. But probably I'll just hack the allocation to ignore issues for a fast jam here, and probably just use allocate and forget, fire and forget allocation, or maybe I'll use arena allocation and ignore stuff. I'm not going to worry about this being a real usable programming language today. Well, let me see what comments. I got some comments now. Okay. Python 3.10 pattern matching. I don't know if it checks for exhaustiveness. I don't think it does, because well, maybe there's variations on it, but it focuses on not lol. Yeah, I see that. The focus for yeah, I'm sure OCaml is a great choice. But anyway, the Python 3.10 pattern matching is structural. It focuses on like pulling things out of dictionaries as well as other kind of data types. And in the context, well, I don't know, I guess you could work out some kind of notion of exhaustiveness there, but it's focused on structural extraction. And so there's no, although Python 3 similarly introduced enums, they don't really have the notion of algebraic data types. And so because of that, it makes less sense to worry about things like exhaustiveness checking, I think, really. Not side effect free. That's a very good point also. In fact, it's not even an expression. Their match syntax is entirely imperative, which is lame. There's a lot of things I really don't like about Python. And one of the reasons I'm using it today is because A, it's familiar to people, and B, it's familiar to me. In the sense of I code Python at work every day. And so I know the API, I know how to use it, at least enough to get the job done when I'm trying to rush through something. I could probably write a better thing in OCaml, but I don't use OCaml every day, and so I'd be slower at it. But yeah, Python, I don't like the syntax best. I don't like the semantics best. There's all kinds of things I don't like about Python, but it will get my job done for the needs today. And hopefully be approachable to some people who might not know all the other languages. But of course, I do crazy languages on my channel, as well as a variety of well-known ones. Anyway, so let's just to point out that we can parse stuff. In fact, let's put a comment in here. Hi, I'm a comment. And let's go ahead and poetry run aho. Say dash dash input. And let's get test setup.py. Okay, so all this does right here is it uses the AST module to parse a text, creates an abstract syntax tree, which I'm then dumping back out to standard out. And we can make a little more space here if I do this, I guess. So we see here that there's a module object that has a body which has a list, Python definition of list, with a function definition. So notice it skips this comment entirely. So if we're going to have first class comments in anything I'm doing today, then we're going to have to use strings for that. And it's actually, as we were discussing earlier, Python doc strings, and apparently Common Lisp also has a notion of doc strings, and obviously would be predating Python. We're already used to using strings for certain forms of commenting in Python, and today anything's going to be string-based because I'm hijacking the Python AST parser that's built into the standard library, and it won't give me comments anyway. So we have our test setup name here, and we see that we have arguments, which is empty, positional only arguments, arguments that have the positional or keyword only arguments, defaults. Okay, and we have a body here which has an assert statement and then a constant true. And so this right here, I'm going to hope, I did a little bit of a preview test of seeing whether I could use the new match statements on this, and so far it worked a little bit. I did not try matching against the data contents. I am hoping that works. I have only barely started playing with the match feature from Python 3.10 yesterday or the day before. So I'm not super familiar with where it will or won't work. It did match against at least the class type. I don't know if I'll be able to test against the attributes or not. Hopefully I can. Yeah, it looks like a lot of people out there, a lot of y'all are familiar with my perspective on Python. I'm really not. Of course, then there's Bjarne Strostrup. I can't figure out how to pronounce his name. Anyway, Bjarne. I'll call him Bjarne because that part's the easiest part. We have the famous line from him about how there's a language people use and a language people complain about. And maybe I dislike Python so much because I use it so much. But yeah, I'm really not a big fan of Python, but I know it well. Okay. So let's get back rid of that comment there. And so I need to do something useful now that I can parse and dump out an AST. That short circuits things to happen here. And I'm going to go ahead and make some kind of test file here that's more interesting than test setup. Basic.aho. I'm going to give the last name of aho, an extension of aho here. And I'm not sure whether I want to tell it that aho is Python or not, because I don't know how to turn on the syntax highlighting in VS Code without also turning on the semantic handling. But I'll pretend that it'll be okay. Just I'm planning to do things that are semantically broken in Python, but syntactically parsable. And so let's start out with just a basic thing. Let's see if we can generate structures in Zig for ourselves. So let's say class person has name, that's a string, and an age, that's an integer. Okay. And let's see if we can take this class definition and convert it into some Zig. We'll worry about comments later because comments are the thing that's supposed to matter tonight. And I have some ideas of what I want to do with them. And some non-crazy things. I discussed earlier some crazy things. I'm going to do some things that are semi-interesting maybe, but definitely not as crazy as I can imagine. Like, one of my crazy ideas was the git commit messages actually affect the semantics of your language. That could be a way of doing first-class comments. Anyway. And I like garlic too. Me gusta el ajo. Okay, so let's go with parsing this new file I created, basic.aho. And let me give it a little more space here. So we have a class def person with annotated assignments or annotation assignments, whatever an is short for. But it's annotation or annotated, I'm sure. Where the target is name and the annotation is stir, or the target is age and the annotation is int. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm not really the fastest coder in the world. I have a lot of time to prepare my videos. I'm guessing some of y'all could do whatever I'm doing or better, faster than I could, but I figured I'd stream and have a little bit of fun tonight anyway. Trying to catch up on the chat here. Yeah, in terms of type annotations, anytime I have control of anything in Python these days, I always use type annotations. I just can't stand a lack of static typing, really. Anyway, so class person. So let's see if we can navigate this inside of our thing here. So instead of just dumping it, let's process the tree, which presumably is a module. Okay, good. And I'll probably try to break things out into more functions and modules of my own as I'm going here, but I'm just going to hack stuff for now. Whatever's convenient is what I'm doing first. So I'll have a tree, which is, and maybe I'll call it a module. We'll see. The thing is, I might want to do arbitrary recursion here, and I don't know what it's going to look like yet. ast.module for now. And let's do a dump here also. Def dump. What does this technically take? Dump takes an AST. Let's see, is that a parent class of this stuff? I guess it is. Okay, so let's see if that works. Let's see, no, I can't call it AST because I'll call it node. AST dot, well, it's hard to type with all these large font things jumping in front of everything I'm doing. AST. And instead of node tree, let's call it node. I like to keep things alphabetical because I'm weird. In my channel, I usually don't do things alphabetically. I usually do things in the order that C and C++ make easiest. So I don't have to pre-declare things. I always put the dependencies up higher and the things that require them down lower. But when I'm doing code separately, I usually like to put things in alphabetical order. So if I say process a module, actually let's just say process a node again here. I'm not quite sure the members of AST. Let's actually go back to module. Now, I usually haven't been using the latest versions of Python, and they have the ability to do structural typing in their static typing through something called typing.protocol, I believe. But I haven't used that because I don't use that that recent of a version day to day at work. But I'll see if I can figure that out, possibly, because I don't know if they've done typing properly for the AST module, such that I can say anything that has a body in it, for example. It could be that module has a body in it, like this. But see, there's no relationship here between these different things. So I can't say, unless there's something here that tells me, unless there's already a protocol defined that says anything that has a body. and if such a thing exists, I'm not aware of it. So I'll just say module for now and do a little bit something else later. Okay, so let's just dump our node for now, just to prove this still works. Okay, so that's still working. Let me go and commit what I already had done previously. Start skeleton. You guys can't see my committing or y'all can't see my committing because I have it over on the left behind the chat window. I had the tip to put a chat window up visually so that people can see it later in the recording, even if the video goes somewhere outside of YouTube. Okay. So here I am, I dump things. So it's time to start actually doing something interesting with this. Let's do, just for kicks, match node, actually for kid in node.body, oops, match kid, case, let's say case class def, ast.classdef. And you do put the parentheses after. I learned that part already. You can't just say ast.classdef. And I'm going to find out in a minute if I can match on the attributes using the Python 3.10 pattern matching. Match class def, print, found a class, which I'm going to turn into structures. I'm going to turn classes into structures. And then I'll dump the kid. How about this? Let's not dump the full tree. What am I doing wrong here? Blah, blah, blah. I got to convince VS Code that I am using Python 3.10. Language version. This was working the other day. Blech. Python. But that was a different project I set up. Apparently I forgot how to do it again here already. What language version do I say is going to use here? I need to see what Python interpreter I'm using, perhaps. Aha. There we go. Okay. Now I'm using the Python. Now VS Code's aware of the Python 3.10. Yeah, I think Python's sort of funny. It went from we don't need no stinking switch statement to full-on pattern matching in one version. So I think that's sort of an interesting transition. I've been long sad of missing switch statements in Python forever. The dictionaries and if statements and everything else, you can work around stuff, but sometimes what you want is a switch or even better, a match. So let's try running this. Okay, I found a class def person. Just for kicks, let's see if it can match on the contents of things. Name equals hi. Ideally, this no longer matches because it's going to check that attribute to see if name is actually equal to hi or not. Ooh, it didn't do it. So looks like we are getting our structural pattern matching in place. Sweet. Okay. I thought that should work, but I had not tried that far yet. So this should make some things nicer later. But for now, I don't care that much. Yeah, I've done dictionaries of lambdas myself in Python. I've done that, and I really can't say I'm a big fan of that. And yeah, I'm sure Elixir is, well, the other thing Elixir will have is we'll actually have expressions. Python just loves statements for some reason. I get when they started, they probably are targeting imperative audiences more. Functional programming has become so mainstream these days. It's sort of weird that there's some things in Python that do functional and other things in Python that they just can't get their minds around making things expressions. So by the way, I'm not going to get this far, but I was imagining, how could you hijack Python syntax and still do expressions for things? So I can't say result equals this. It says, oh, yeah, I totally died. I can't cope with that because that's not how things work. Match is a statement, not an expression. But I was imagining instead I could say things like this, result equals ... And of course, this is not semantically good Python, but I could take this and treat it as if I were assigning the result there. It wouldn't work for embedding it as an argument inside of a function or function call, but it would work for assignments. I could hack that into submission probably. Anyway, so I found a class and I'm going to change this to process module for now. And I'm going to now process class def. Oops. Really? What refactorings do I actually have here? No reference available. Of course they don't. Okay. Def process. They won't hippie complete it for me either, will they? Okay, I'm going to really hack this for now. For the moment, I'm not going to worry about any kind of analysis phase, I don't think. So really, after I have an AST, I should expose the definitions, and then I can run like some kind of extraction pass, some kind of resolution pass where I resolve the symbols to their definitions. I don't know how much time I'll have to work through all that stuff. I have not freshly coded that kind of stuff up, so I'd have to think harder about it. I'm going to do the quickest hack possible starting out, and then worry about more passes later for doing smarter things. So, run this here. Should have found a class. Okay. Now what I want to do is go through the class body. For kid in node, see if I can type, dot body again. We're not going to do class bases. Yeah, I'm not going to worry about inheritance at all for my structures for this language today. For kid in node dot body, match kid again. And I can say case ast dot, let's go with anassign for now. And I technically could be extracting out the body and passing it along, but I don't hate the idea of passing along the full thing there. However, for the anassign, do I want to keep, oh, they're clever, okay. Do I want to keep the assignment as a full thing? I think I probably do, actually, which is sort of sad. The thing is that there's basically two places. Now, traditionally, there's been only one place in Python where you can destructure your values, and that is function parameters. I can destructure my dictionary into a function parameter. I don't have, I forget what they call this in Haskell. They don't call it destructuring. They call it, maybe one of y'all know what they call it. There's a different name for it in Haskell, but in JavaScript they call it destructuring assignment. And you can like do tuple assignment type stuff and do tuple destructuring in C++ these days. But I have a few basic options for destructuring. And one option to do destructuring is in parameters. And the other way you can do it in Python apparently now is you can destructure inside of your cases for your pattern matching. And I really don't want it here. I think I probably just want to pass the kid along to handling a class member. So I'll say process class field with the kid. So AST dot and assign for now. Let's dump the individual assignments. One thing I was noticing though here inside of VS Code, I think I'm just using the standard Python extension that comes from Microsoft directly. And if you notice here, it actually knows that in this case, kid is an assign, an annotated assignment, which is really clever because it turns out the Python plugin for VS Code already supports Python 3.10, and MyPy already supports Python 3.10. And between the two put together, that's sort of handy. I had no idea what to expect there. We should have, oh, we don't have MyPy turned on? We can get MyPy turned on. MyPy. I want to lint using MyPy. Come on, seriously, people? I want MyPy linting enabled. Linting. Well, it should be complaining at this point because oh, really? Oh, maybe MyPy doesn't support. I thought MyPy was coping. Apparently MyPy is not going to cope with Python 3.10. But VS Code editor is, so I'll just cope with that instead. It just means I'm not going to get official complaints about my type annotations, which is going to make it hard to make sure I get them right. Oh well. If I get it right enough, then VS Code will help me code better. And I have a cat attacking me right now. Sorry, I don't get to see. But yeah, the cat is meowing at me and he is bumping me because he wants attention. Okay. Yeah, definitely I'm a big fan of black. I think black is going to cope with, let's see if actually what black does. Let me just hack some black here. Aho, startup, hi, whatever. It does not like that. I went complaining. You already knew I was using Python 3.10. What do you do? Apparently I confused something. Really, VS Code? Thought we had this worked out. Default interpreter path. Okay. Retamed that. Still going to complain though, is it? Poetry. Okay. So we found a class and we have two assignments here. And that will have to do for the moment. So now I want to extract. It's funny. They don't have destructuring assignment in Hex. Hex is a language originally based on ActionScript 3. I did an interview with Nicolas Canas a little over a year ago. And in doing the demo for that, and I probably should want to get back to it. I want to do a whole video on Hex sometime where I compile Hex to everything. But they have pattern matching in Hex, and that's the only way to do destructuring. And the pattern matching is not like, Elixir pattern matching, where it sort of looks like assignment. The pattern matching looks like, match, whatever. But I found a macro that lets you make single line pattern match to extract things out for destructuring assignment. Anyway, but for the moment, if I want to destructure this, I'll either need to destructure it in the parameters, because that's all Python can do, or brand new in a match statement. So maybe for kicks, we'll pattern match it all over again just to extract out the contents. Let's see how this works. As I mentioned earlier, I'm brand new for trying to use the Python pattern matching, so I don't really know what it does and doesn't do very well. So we should be able to get a target and an annotation. And let me put them out of order, alphabetical order, to see if it copes. So annotation is type any. Target is type any. Is that really expected? They are of type expression. Expression is type AST. So really, I would expect these to be automatically inferred to be of type AST. That really makes me a little bit mad. Annotation. Now I know somebody did some kind of like the Rust debug macro, the DBG macro. Someone's made something like that for Python also, such that I don't have to go to this pain of saying what I'm printing and printing at the same time. But I don't remember the name of that tool. Okay. And it's type any. Really? Can I annotate these here? Can I annotate this as ast.ast? Apparently that doesn't work. How lame. So apparently Pylance, that's Microsoft's analysis tool for Python, will not infer the type correctly for me for what I've extracted. And it also will not let me annotate it. I wonder if I can pre-annotate it, which is obnoxious. Yeah, I don't tend to be so directly commenting on my opinions while I'm on my main videos. But here you got me live, and so you probably hear me talk more about whatever kinds of complaints I have. Let's dump the annotation and dump the target. Okay. Let me go ahead and commit the current changes. Really? Why is it complaining every time I switch here? Like every time I am adding things in Git, it resets the interpreter. Oh, now they're doing the settings for me. Let's take the settings along with me, actually. I'm going to even keep it in my... I don't know if I'll version control it or ignore it. I don't know yet. I'll do one of the two. Oh, I'll version control it. Adding it to Git. So let's see. We have settings.json or JSON. We have main that's starting to process things. And we have our test file. So let's start walking trees. Okay. That's funny. Yeah. I wonder if I can I name my live stream? Let me see if I can name my live stream. Edit, title, I guess probably I can. Let's rename this to trying out JT's langjam. And theme is first class comments. That's JT's theme, not mine. And I think they know how ridiculous that sounds. I think they did it on purpose. Oh, that's right. I forgot the whatever in the thing. Okay, sweet. Thanks for the tip. I'd seen that before and I forgot about it. I'm usually not quite in new enough versions of Python to use all the features. Let's get rid of dump being a direct print and instead try this. So equals, well, dump annotation. Is that the right syntax? Oh, I need to put curly. Oh, it's silly me. No? Equals on the other side, huh? That's funny. Let's see what this says now. Oh. Oh, I need to return it, silly me. Return. You know, I really, really wish, aha, this is doable. I really, really wish that Python would take functional programming seriously sometime. Maybe they're afraid of scaring off all the people with if suddenly everything had values. I don't know. And we got the same problem where every time I make changes to Git, or just every so rarely, I mean, I even have, how can it not know what my Python interpreter is by now? There it is. I have Python 3.10. Let's see what on earth is happening here. Please let me get Python version number. It keeps insisting on switching back to that I'm not using Python 3.10. Drive me a little bit bonkers. Version. How obnoxious. Whatever. Apparently, ever so rarely, it's going to try to convince me that I can't use Python match statements. Yeah, this right here is not quite as clean as the Rust DBG macro, but it definitely beats a lot of alternatives for being built into the language. Thanks for the tip on that. I had, like I said, seen it before, but I forgot about it because I have not been usually using quite new enough versions of Python day to day. So I forget some of those things. Okay, so I'm dumping that now. Let's very hackishly start dumping some things out. In fact, let's do two things. Let's get logging going. I'll need to set up stupid logging also. I forget, I usually have my own logging setup routine that's a little bit customized at work that I just copy and paste around. I don't have that handy here at home. Python init logging, because I don't like the very default logging in Python. Out of the box is not pretty. Basic config, that's what I'm looking for. Logging basic config. Okay, so let's switch all of the current printing to infos. Excuse me. And presumably, I now have no output because Python is friendly enough by default you don't get to see your output. Let's do logging.basic_config, which maybe at nothing gives me at least some output. Nope. I need to do level. Level equals logging.info. Is this what I need to do? There we go. Okay. That's not what I'm going to do. Okay. So I want to do that because I'm going to presume, even though I didn't review it freshly, I presume that we're logging by default to standard error, which means I can use standard out. Yeah, there's, well, hopefully it's standard error by default, because I usually customize things anyway. And I'm not going to spend time to customize it right now. Let's do some quick hack junk here. Let's print, where I'll use standard out for my output right now. Probably something smarter to be done than this. Struct. I'm going to do no escaping at the moment. We are in hack mode. Struct kid dot name dot, no, it's just a string. Okay. I thought it would be some kind of a node, but apparently it's just a string. Kid.name, whatever identifier is. That's cute. Identifier is a string. All right. Okay. I will want to keep track of indent levels. Bother. Oh, really? Okay. Now, of course, I don't have any need to make this be a format string, but if I just make everything format strings, I might have to think about it less. So I'll use that as a format string. Okay. So let's run this. And sweet. Let me switch these to debugs. I'll leave it infos, whatever. Now I'm going to hack this indentation level. Print 3, 4. And I'll need to have, let me review. The syntax. I'm doing it on my browser occasionally, sorry y'all. But I'm not sure I want to share all of my screen. Let me see. ziglang.org. Duplicate. And okay. So I'm going to try to compile to Zig. And in very hack fashion, I want to review how structs look in Zig again. Okay, that's right. So we'll say const this equals struct that with a semicolon on the end. Really? That's interesting. Okay. Anyway, back over here now. And we're going to say commas on the back. Target dot, that's right, doesn't know what a target is. Target, we'll call it an AST. Does this work? That name was a thing. I can't just, this is so lame. That's right, because inside it. Does this work? Aha. Apparently I can predefine my data types before the match ever starts. It would be awful nice if they auto-inferred that here. It almost makes it useless to do the extraction. I presume if I just said this equals node dot target, at least sees it here. Instead of like going deep, like 8 levels deep every time I want to get something out, I think I'm going to skip the idea of using pattern matching sheerly for the value of destructuring assignment, just because too much indentation. So I also need to get a data type here. And so we will hack version just put in, let's pretend for the moment it's always going to be a name, which is not really true. Let's say target though is ast.name. And let's say annotation is ast.name for now too. I probably should be in pattern matching on this also, figure out for sure what it is, but I can just hack it and pretend that's what I've always got here, because I am working on a time limit. Annotation dot ID. Okay. So if I run this, and I get rid of my logging temporarily. Ooh, looky there. I wonder if Zig can run something from the command, from standard in. Apparently not. Blech. Okay. Probably looks like I'm probably going to have to dump zig run-h. Okay. And grep that for standard in or out. Nope, apparently that's not going to happen. Okay. Well, I'll put this back in here for now. I'm just going to hack this out. I need to make a real test framework here that actually runs things in a more serious way. I need to have it be generating something, that could be in memory instead of this kind of hack here. So let's see, cat hi.zig. Of course, if I say zig run hi.zig, it'll say there's no main in there. There's no main in there. Well, we can hack that too. Print pub fn main nothing. And I probably should be keeping my consistency in this. So I'm always using format strings everywhere to keep track of what I'm doing better. Well, let me output it first. Oh, I need to say the return type on zig. Let me void. Yay, it ran and did nothing. Okay. So I have converted this structure here into a struct in Zig and done nothing interesting with it. Oh, that works, does it? Oh, I forgot that. Right, you can do the little subshell thing. Thank you. The cloner X. I have used that before, but I always forget everything. Okay, let's try this. Let's rim the... Sometimes I see what's out, but I will... I won't remove it yet, but let's just for kicks do this thing. Zig, run, poetry, run, aho, blech. All these words. Whoa. Huh. It looks like Zig's going to insist on a .zig extension. I'm going to guess what this means here. So it actually won't work. That's interesting. I don't know what their intentions are in the end, but this is just stuff they haven't gotten around to doing yet, or if this is purposeful. But in any case, looks like that's not going to work. Correctly does nothing. Exactly. So much effort to do nothing. Okay. So one of the things I've sometimes enjoyed doing when I've done compiler projects in the past, no, I am, just get out of the way, I am not an expert at making programming languages or compilers or anything. I have played in the past. I have made little hack compilers. I've converted other people's compilers and things. That doesn't mean that I'm really strong in the topic. I enjoy now analyzing programming languages, but someone else will already have exactly how they want to structure their program. And I'm sort of this winging this as I'm going. So, and I'm not exactly a speed coder either. So that will impact how things go. But what I want to do though is, so say I have this input file here, this basic.aho in this case. And what I would like to do is have the program that have the test infrastructure actually, it's sort of a hack. Instead of just do things in memory and just run as assertions, sometimes I like to actually have a script that goes and generates the output format. Because I like making compilers. People say transpiler, but I don't care. Transpiler is not a really useful term to me. To me, if you're converting from one language to another, you're compiling it. And so, yeah, I like to compile to readable languages. And I like to have the cached version in version control because it's so easy to diff things with my standard version control differs to say, oh, here's the previous output from this input file. And of course, that's not how most test infrastructures are designed to go. I might make a little hack script here that just simply runs stuff and dumps it out. So that, and then actually take this, like what I have for hi.zig here, actually put that into version control into Git. And then if I change how I've generated it, I can see the diff right inside of Git. Sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit here. Just late enough in the day for me, and if I use my voice too much, sometimes it goes. Does nothing successfully. Very good. Okay. So, what am I doing next? I think I'm going to make that script for generating stuff because I don't want to have to manually deal with all this stuff. And I probably don't want to see these all the time either, all these loggings. Do I want to write my script in Bash or want to write my script in Python? Probably do a Bash for now, but oftentimes when I'm using Python, I prefer to write my control scripts in Python also, just because by the time they get fancy, I can do fancy Python much easier than I can do fancy Bash. But for the moment, I'll just go ahead and do it in Bash. Okay. So I'm going to totally hack it for now. No, maybe I should redo it in Python. I'll do it in Python, whatever. Later on I'll want it in Python anyway. Of course, not like that's going to last past a few hours worth of work. All the bother again. Main. So parser equals arg parse dot argument parser blah 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 parser dot add argument. I don't need to parse arguments. I'm going to hack this stuff. What I really want to do is say path equals path file dot parent slash test for kid in path dot iter if kid dot suffix equals, I think it comes with a dot, aho compile. Oh, that one. Just so I don't bother with the deep built-ins. Personally, I think Python has way too many global definitions. It drives me up the wall, really. But, you know, whatever. What can I do about it? Aho compile kid. Import subprocess run actually I want to do output, sorry. Actually, since I've learned Python, I don't need to do a command line. I can say I'll have to hack it for now. What does my main have here? Main actually does run. I'll import Aho for now. This I'll need to actually structure. One of the, I've mentioned it before, I really dislike that Python by default exports everything. Even if I define the underscore underscore all underscore underscore, it really has limited support from tooling in the language itself, what that means. So it's really hard to, in my opinion, it's really hard to properly design your namespaces in Python. But whatever. Aho.main. .run input equals, right now it has to be a string, so I'll switch it back over here. Kid. If I say Python gentest.py. That was interesting. Oh, I never called main. I'm a monster. And maybe it doesn't matter here. Oh, I'll be wild and crazy. Me and my hello world. Sweet. Okay. Okay, getting somewhere. And parent, really? Oh, kid. I shouldn't call it a kid. I should call it source, whatever. And I'll say, oops, destination equals source dot parent followed by source dot stem, or with suffix, with suffix dot zig bother. And here's why I have to run it as a subprocess, because I'm not returning this as a string. Maybe I should do that. I need to start carrying context around. Maybe I wish I were passing around handling some monads and doing some kind of whatchamacallit, the writer monad. If I had a writer monad here, I would just be passing that, having that go around and be funneling all my outputs to that. As it is, how do I want to be getting a string out? I could be running this as a sub-process and capturing the standard out. But really, I want to be gathering this up as a string at some point anyway, for convenience sake. I'll actually go back to sub-process. I think I changed my mind. I'll do sub-process. Subprocess.run. Python. And you can actually do like shutils, I think, has stuff to automatically extract things, but I'll just do this for now. Aho -- input source. Does automatically capture standard out by default? Capture output equals true. Time to pull some black out here on this pretty soon. Args equals capture output equals true. The thing is, I want to generate multiple files, not just one file. But I'll deal with that later. I got centered error and centered out. Lame. I want to only standard out. Clearly, I am forgetting some of my details in Python here after all. Seriously, folks. Take a look at the documentation. Yeah, sys executable, that's a good idea. Let's do that. I'm going to figure this out though. Python subprocess capture standard out only. I look at Stack Overflow and documentation also, but sometimes the source is easier to look at. I look at whatever is convenient at the moment. Actually, right now I'm actually looking at Stack Overflow. I just didn't share that screen, that window, sorry. And it's not being very useful to me, actually. I'm being pretty unhappy with it. Blech. Bother. Maybe I'll just go ahead and generate what I ought to be generating anyway, instead of capturing standard out, because it's sort of a stopgap thing anyway. Multiprocessing. Well, multiprocessing is designed for, unless I'm remembering it wrong, multiprocessing is designed not for shelling out. Multiprocessing is designed for doing parallel operations. So there's multi-threading and there's multiprocessing. Maybe I'm remembering that wrong though. Like that multiprocessing is where they have like the pools and things, which is one of your only ways to get parallel processing happening in Python. Oh, okay. So I think I'm actually going to hack out from this and get back into doing something that I want to do anyway, which is writing things to where I want them to go. Bother. I think there's probably something straightforward, but I'm having trouble finding the easy, quick answer. Hi, Shadow. I have my cat meowing at me again. Well, one of my cats. I actually have 4 cats here. And my room is getting warm. I can't open the door here. At risk of increased noise. You want it out? Okay. We just say standard out equals, things I don't think this will work though. Subprocess.pipe. I don't think this is what I want it to do. Or maybe this is it. There we go, maybe. But it's bytes. Okay, I need to... That's what I wanted to do. Result.standardout.decode. I presume we're in UTF-8 at the moment. Should I build a UTF-8? Yeah, okay, let's try that. There we go. That gets the job done. Sorry for being slow on that, y'all. I was getting myself hung up a little bit. And let's just live with this for the moment. But I'm going to do this. Destination equals here. Then I'll say with open dest write as outstream.write standard out. This is super hack here. Okay, so now we actually have, let me get rid of this junk, delete file. Aha, now we can store this. Okay, now again, so here's where's the source file? Let me get it here. Under test, we now have our basic.aho and our basic.zig that we generated using very hack form and not well structured code at all. Okay, and really, we'll worry later about what goes in main. Technically, we're building whatchamacallit. Could be building libraries by default, but I think it's more fun just to run things. So I'll probably auto-generate a main and everything, and at some point we'll actually have a real main and run it there. So I'm sort of happy with this for the moment, even though it's super hackish. And I'm going to save these things in my version control. Loop write outputs. Yeah, Clonerex, you have the right answer there. And hi, Big Boy Steen. Okay, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Anyway, so now we have some Aho, which uses Python syntax being translated into Zig. Only this is actually very good. Let's actually, I'm going to manually hack this output here for the Zig, which of course will get rewritten over when I do gen test, which is fine because this shouldn't be manually modified here. Let's do some const standard equals, if I can remember my Zig. I do so many languages and I don't do Zig every day for sure. Standard.d, but I was recently doing it for the recent video, so hopefully for what I'm doing. So let's say const person equals dot, I think this works maybe for syntax. Well, let's go with Alice, go with alphabetical order names, dot age equals 42. Answer likely worse than everything, right? And let's print out person ID. This won't work, I don't think, because I don't think there's a stir type in Zig. I think I need to make it a slice of U8. So I think it's what it ought to be. And so this probably will fail bad here. Oops, I did the wrong thing. Hee hee. Zig run basic test basic.zig. Alice, that worked. Apparently stirs a thing in Zig. That surprises me. Stir like some kind of I expected to have to say this for Zig. Maybe stir is some kind of alias for slice of U8 that I didn't notice. I don't see the documentation. Maybe it's there. Okay, whatever. Guess I don't need to say slice of U8. I can just auto-generate stir and it'll work. Okay. Well, let's overrun this again. Okay, back to where it was. And in fact, inside of my gen test, I can go ahead and run these after I've written them also. And this I want to subprocess for sure. So for kicks, let's subprocess.run generate Zig run Zig. Speaking of comments, we're supposed to do comments. I actually have no ideas what I want to do with comments, but I want to get some basic stuff happening first. Maybe I need a print statement and I need access to members so that I can do something half interesting. I purposely made structs because I want to be able to do something, I don't know. I like having structs available. I probably should have started with just basic local variables instead of structs, but oh well. Subprocess.run. I'm going to presume Zig is in the path. Zig run. And then I want to use, I'm pretty sure I can't pass paths into subprocess run. So if I do this, presumably ran Zig just now too, only it doesn't do anything. So let's actually have our default Zig. Do something useless. Standard.debug.print. Hi. With our empty thing here. What am I doing wrong? All right, because this is there. And remember my own things. Import indent, dedent. What's the name of the thing? I've actually used it in my videos before to automatically dedent my text. Python dedent string. Text wrap, that's it. Import text wrap. If I were to black this thing, it would not be happy with that. Why don't we do this? I wonder what black will do with this. Shouldn't call it main though. Let's call it script, whatever. There we are. Nope. I need to do this now. Const standard equals import standard. Okay. Sweet. Okay. Now we'll always get high coming out. And we have a new zig output that includes, oh, I should strip that up while I'm at it. Strip. Wrong order to things. Yeah, I thought so. Strip needs to go outside the dedent. There we are. Not the ugliest thing ever, not the prettiest thing ever. Okay, good enough. Oh, first class comments. I got a comment from Vera Sivarajan. I don't know how to pronounce her name, I'm sorry. But what are first class comments? Yeah, so go to Wikipedia and you'll find an article, if you're still here. Go to Wikipedia, find an article on first class citizens in programming languages. And for those first class citizens in programming languages, you'll see a discussion of various other things you might consider first class. And I didn't invent the theme first class comments. That was what was given. And I had some notes here, which I won't go over again too much at the moment, but what could you do with first class comments? So first class comments are either really good comments or comments that can be used like other values in your language. Which of course, if comments have no semantic meaning, why would you do that? Now you could go with literate programming perhaps. I'm not a really big fan of literate programming. I'd rather look at code first and then be able to annotate discussions to my heart's content. Now, let me see. Strings and comments. If strings and comments are the same, which is what I'm going to be doing here, then strings and comments have a lot in common, like I had in that recent video about multi-line strings. And so if you have if you have strings as your comments and comments as strings, then you can sort of overload the concept. So the string's not doing anything, it's more of a comment. The question is, should your comments have semantic value? And if your comments have semantic value, some kind of actual meaning, it's sort of like annotations, or what we call decorators in Python, or annotations in JavaScript or Java or things like that, where it's sort of like a comment, but it actually affects the language and changes the behavior, in which case, is it really a comment anymore? Alternatively, you could say erase types, like generics in Java or the type annotations in Python, usually, or definitely in TypeScript. The type annotations have no meaning in the language. In a sense, they're just like elaborate comments. And those elaborate comments even have, they're like a whole language in TypeScript around manipulating types and transforming types. And so technically you call those things basically comments because they have no semantic meaning in the language. They just affect the linter, which is the type checker. And so in a sense, they're just very elaborate comments with the whole language around them. I think I've even heard that types in TypeScript are Turing complete. So the Turing complete language for types in TypeScript that effectively are just very elaborate comments that can be automatically checked by a static analysis tool that have no impact on the semantics of the language. So you could call those first-class comments, perhaps. Alternatively, you could say you have like compile time string processing of your comments. So you have maybe a language that manages actual textual comments at compile time. That's a possible thing to do with stuff. I might do a little bit of that if I can have time to actually get to comments here. Hee hee. But there's two things I sort of want to do. One of them is this. Now this is actually related to tooling. And that's the whole problem here is, to me, the most interesting thing to do with comments also needs tooling support. And while tooling and language go together, and the most ridiculous thing I thought of, again, is either having your git commit messages and or like comments in a Google document actually have semantic meaning that manipulate the behavior of the files that they're annotating. That'd be first-class comments. Wow. Of course, first-class could mean top-notch comments also, if you want to reinterpret the meaning of that, which is totally fair if you've done game jams. People reinterpret meanings all they want to. And but one of the things I really like to do in programming is at times just stay, I'm in my program and say, well, what I really want to do is just type everything I want to say about this thing here that's on my mind, whatever comes to mind. It's auto-completing to words. And it'd be nice if there's just all in this little text box that gets ignored, which sort of works if you have a language, if your editor folds comments. But it'd just be sort of nice to say, no, I want to at length comment on this expression. I don't want to suck out that sub-expression. I just want to like comment at length about the sub-expression. It'd be nice if I could just say, hey, editor, let me talk all about this thing. And everything I said about it is remembered in my source and in a fashion that can be properly version controlled, but it's explicitly about particular expressions. And yeah, I could have pop-ups like this where they go like pop-ups like this that tell you all things about it. It'd be nice if your markdown that's sitting there just loads up right there, but also is part of your source in a way that doesn't impact your language. So I have some notions of how I want to try to deal with that here, which could be fun. The other thing I want to deal with is the issue of redundant comments. Selection, let me talk what I mean by redundant comments. Let me change which window I'm capturing. Let's capture Firefox for the moment. Okay. And go to NumPy repo. It's so not dark mode. Whew! Dark mode back again. Okay, so if we go to NumPy core, like numeric.py, for example, here. Let's make this bigger. Bigger on screen. And maybe I'll move this. Thing here temporarily. No, that's not what I want to do. There we are. Let's move that over there for a second. So the thing is, what's not very awesome in documentation? Now, doc comments I have mixed feelings on because, you know, it's great to be able to document things and it's presumably it'd be nice to have documentation in different languages. And if you have documentation in source, you've inherently always prioritized one language, which usually, well, in the libraries I use is English. It could be that in other places people are doing their own stuff they write in their own language. It's not English. In this other stuff here, but it prioritizes one particular language over others. Human language, I mean, in this case. And the other thing that's not really cool about this format here is how I have to repeat myself. Thing is, if I have to repeat myself anyway, because I'm going to like impose documentation from outside in a variety of human languages, then that makes sense anyway. But in this case, if I have just one language, in a lot of cases there is, again, the NumPy documentation by default here in English. I have to give my name here and the name here, and in both places, and I have to follow particular rules where I have to say bool down here. Presume I might have set it up there as well. And it would be nice not to repeat myself in this fashion. Number one. Number two, dtype. So for example, we have dtype documentation all over. Desired data type for the array. Over as a data type of the result. the desired data type for the array overrides the data type of the result. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe 8, I don't know, handful of places where I'd say D type. And then furthermore, there is things like there's axis right here where I have axis repeated a number of times, axis to be rolled, move array axes to, oh, that's not it. Okay. Unnormalized index or indices of the axis. Define the axis of A, B, and C. Axis or tuple of axes. In fact, they all usually are axis or tuple of axes. Axis or axes along which elements are shifted. So there's parts here that they've customized what they've said about it, but there's same things that apply even in the documentation notion every time there's an axis thing there. And it'd be nice to have, well, one thing you do is maybe if you had type aliases, you document that type alias of what kind of thing an axis is. And instead of saying an axis is an int or tuple events, you could give a type alias for that. But it also might be nice to say, for example, again, that if everything that's called axis should have certain common documentation plus anything custom you want to give to it. And so I can imagine these kinds of things have value to them if you can deal with comments in a more first-class fashion. So I have some notions of things that might be useful there if I even get that far, because I have limited time to dedicate to this. And so basically I'm just seeing what I can do and trying out a live stream for the first time ever. This is new for me, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing as I'm going. Anyway, so those are some thoughts about first-class stuff. Hopefully, first-class comments. Hopefully that's interesting a little bit. Anyway, you can see my stream there, what's going on. Show the window. Which technically doesn't have anything terribly private there, but I did not mean to show that on purpose. Let me see. That's not what I meant to do either. I meant to switch back over. I'm still learning how to use OBS for streaming. That's new for me. Gentest.py. Okay. And let me grab this and move it back over there out of the way of my terminal.
You can also edit it before you let it be permanent on your page if you want.
Anyway, so hopefully people who are... also I missed a previous question. This video will be available later, right? Yeah, I'm hoping this video will be available later. That is my intention. I may or may not edit it first, but... Oh, they think I should be streaming at a higher bit rate. I don't know how to change the bit rate on my streaming. Oh well. This is I'm not streaming at a fast enough rate. Are things okay? Is the stream coming across fine to everybody or not? There's no YouTube's complaining at me saying I should be streaming at a higher bit rate. And I'm not even sure how to change that. Anyway, if someone has a tip for me, let me know. I'll get back to coding here now. Okay, so I did not mean to import that. Close that down. So now I am running Zig. Run Zig. Probably do pushes on some of these things. Get push. Okay. And I have, this is a fork off of the main jam 0001 that JT put up. I have no expectation of winning anything here. In fact, I actually have some intention of covering some of the results of the langjam. I figured if I played it some myself, I'd have more of a first-hand perspective on what people were doing while they're doing it. At first, I wasn't going to do the langjam at all, because again, I don't have a lot of time, and I'm not really a fast coder when it comes down to it. Okay. So here I have basic stuff going. I'm going to try to see if black worked. I can't remember if black was working or not. No, black doesn't cope with Python 3.10. Hopefully they'll catch up sometime. So we'll have limited use from black for now. By the way, right here when I'm doing the sub-process run again, I'm trying to follow black style syntax. When I'm doing sub-process run here and I'm running the generated script, I probably want to write the output of that as well. In fact, I'll do that already while I'm at it. So let me do this thing again here where I've said standard out equals sub-process pipe. I'm going to get the run result. I'm going to try to avoid reusing my variable names for different meanings. And this probably should be two separate functions, but whatever. Blech. Yeah, I'll deal with it later. I should factor out some functions here, but I'm not going to deal with it at the moment. Run dest equals. That's not what I'm going to do. With suffix text. Let's say with open run dest as dest stream whatever. Yeah, I should have done that. So what I really should be doing is, well, it depends. Don't repeat yourself. Some people say you should repeat yourself. But minimally, you should be trying to do separate functions. But I'm not going to deal with it for the moment. But notice we have two things that look exactly the same here. And that shows that maybe I ought to be abstracting this. But it depends. Some people say you should only stop repeating yourself after you said the same thing 3 times in a row. But whatever. For the moment, I'm repeating myself. And I can improve this later when I see fit. So the thing is, what I'm doing here now is I'm actually writing to and I'm planning to put inside of Git only the output files that I generated from the destination files. I compiled a Zig, and so I have the Zig destination file here. I'm also running the Zig script and storing the output of that. Which means I don't want to create really gigantic files as part of these tests if I'm planning to put them inside of Git. But again, the nice thing about having them in Git is that I have a history of what the results used to look like when I do future versions. Ideally, actually, I'm keeping track of the runtime of these things and automatically logging the runtimes, and those things could go in Git as well. And so anytime there's changed anything, I can go use the standard diff tools and see what changed, and I can go look at different times in history where the output file has changed. So sort of like a very nice hack way to keep track of the behavior of your programs as you go by putting the outputs into Git. I don't know if people can really recommend that as a good practice, but I find it as a good hack that saves me time and effort for dealing with these kinds of situations. Okay, so let's see what happens if I run this now. Hi. Oh, I forgot to do. Why is it saying hi? Because I should have been standard out subprocess.pipe. Oh, because I did center debug. Ooh, silly me. Maybe I do want to do this here. Said capture output equals true. What I want to do probably is capture both standard and standard error and save them both at different files. But I'm going to hack this for now. Let's see what happens now. What? Oh, whatever. Wasn't I earlier getting the entire thing? Maybe I still have to do this, I guess. I thought I had something else happening earlier. I'm going crazy right now. basic.text has no output in it. Yeah, already things don't match the previous stuff. Oh, whatever. I'm not worried about the repeat that use of that thing. What happens if I do this? Oh, they don't like me with suffix. Blah, blah, blah. Well, let me get away with this. Whatever. There it is. Sure, whatever. I'll keep two separate ones. It's a little bit noisy at that point, but I don't care enough at the moment. So I have no output from that, and I do have an error from that because I'm doing standard debug error. So let's see. I have now run zig and capture out and error. Okay. Let's not look at that one for a while. Hopefully the things just deal with it on their own there. And presumably I can ignore some of these things. I really don't like logging infrastructures usually because, and I've heard Elixir's got some great stuff, and Erlang also has some great stuff for managing your logging, from externally managing stuff, because I find that whatever I am logging, I don't care about, and whatever I care about is something I didn't bother to log. That's usually how logging works for me. Okay, but for the moment, I do not care about those things. That part is done. Okay, we got to do something a little more interesting at this point. Trying to check stuff here. It's still whining at me about not using the stream rate they like me to be using. But I don't know what they want. I don't know how to change it. This really is new to me. Okay. Anyway. I am going to come back to doing a next thing. Okay, so here I have, I'll get rid of the basic zig for the moment. Here's my aho thing again. Okay, so one thing I want to do for fun, which is probably a bad idea. I asked about this actually on our programming languages once, about whether languages do this, and I was told that things like Agda and Idris and maybe Coq have this kind. I don't know the new name for Coq. I don't know if they picked a new name yet. I don't know. But in any case, that some of those languages, some of those proof languages and dependently typed languages, some of them have this kind of feature, which is that you can give a name, so you can give a type out of the gate for the thing. So like I could say anytime there's a string anywhere, it's going to be of type stir. Sorry, in terms of a name anywhere, it's going to be type stir. And anytime there's an age anywhere, it's going to be type int. Unless you make this be the default, for example. And then over here, if I don't give the types, then it should automatically pick up those types as being the defaults for that variable name. And the reason why I sort of like this, and it sort of has to do with the issue of, I think of it as first class comments in a sense. Now the thing is, since I'm generating Zig in a way that the type annotations actually have semantic meaning, the type annotations here aren't just comments like they would be normally in Python or say in TypeScript. But we can still think of it as a form of comment, right? And I can say, because at one point where I've said, I said name, I want to repeat that elsewhere. I can also say things like this, for example. Could be full name or just preferred name. The thing is, what I'm starting to feel like sometimes is that when I'm writing code, if you're following conventions throughout, then at least large subsections of my programs that I write tend to use the same names for the same meanings. And it could also, for instance, you can make it type aliases. So we could say, for example, name equals, this is not a real syntax in Python, and we could make it into syntax in this if we wanted to. Name is new type stir. You know, the new type notion you might get from Rust or from Haskell or things like that. And then we could just say, that's the definition of a name, and we call this a name now, in which case I've still said, by default, anytime I see a variable name, it's going to default to the type name. That's a possibility we could go down the path of. Alternatively, you could have types be lowercase, and then by default, a variable called name is of type name. And the pros and cons of that are that you can't really independently reference the type as an expression inside of your main expression language, which you may or may not want to do. If types only appear in a whole type namespace inside of type annotations, then this is okay. But otherwise, it's hard to know whether you're referring to a variable or to a type. Anyway, but for the moment, I don't want to worry about type definitions, including new type, opaque to new types kind of things. What I want to start supporting is this kind of thing. Age in years rounded down from birth date. Because I know in some cultures, age is defined by the calendar year as opposed to from your birth date. So I'm just going to pretend that whatever I'm tracking means this. And so I'm inventing comments here. I don't really care what these mean. I'm just implying the idea, sort of like we saw in NumPy, how axis always is an int or a tuple of ints, and it always has certain meanings. D-type has certain types, and it always has certain meanings associated with it. And it says axis and D-type and shape, for example. Shape always has certain meanings and certain types associated with it. And so the idea I'm trying to have here is that I can centralize my comments and my schema such that anytime I'm using names and ages elsewhere, they mean the same thing. And in fact, ideally, this is actually more fun if I have this as a structurally typed language as opposed to a nominally typed language, in which case, which of course had to generate different kinds of Zig if I want to do that. But the idea, what I mean by that is, say I have something somewhere else that has class car, and it has an age also, for example, birth date, or manufacture date, or manufacture date, etc. The idea is if I always want to use integer ages, then, and the ages are always have certain meaning associated with them, then anywhere across my program where I am using this type of age, and I know that I want to have it mean a similar thing, and this probably isn't the best example with person and car, but the notion is that I can plug things around in a consistent fashion. It makes a lot more sense, say, in NumPy, where I had axis. I can forward axis to axis to axis to axis across multiple function calls, and I know I always want them to have the same approximate meaning and the same data types across 90% of those use cases. And so if I have it defined that way, then I can define my schema in one place, even if I'm using them and if I have different function parameters or different struct fields or whatever else. And of course, there's definitely pros and cons to this kind of notion. Whatever you do in a language, there's pros and cons. But I've had in my mind the idea of what happens if you do this. And I haven't used a language that does this, even though apparently there are languages that do, but I don't have much experience in such languages. And so I wanted to see what it feels like. And so what I want to do next is figure out how to take this and convert it to where I am automatically applying the right types to these when I generate my Zig output. Anyway, I see there are some more comments here. So a simple way of doing simple new types. Yeah, well, I would like a simple way of doing simple new types. Sorry, I'm behind a little bit. I just see Travis Hartwell's comment here and Victor Panissa. Yeah, so simple way of doing simple new types. That could be cool. Right at the moment, I'm not concerned with the new type thing. I was just implying it could be nice to have a way of doing new types. And that could be an alternative to defining a standard for each variable name. But right now I'm going to go down the path of not worrying about new types and instead focus on the idea of defining a common schema by variable name in advance and a common documentation or comment for each thing in advance, such that whenever you are using the same variable name elsewhere as a parameter, as a local variable, or as a struct field, it defaults to having that same semantic meaning inside of your program. So you don't have to repeat yourself everywhere. And so that your code hopefully becomes more standardized. I wouldn't be likely to, like some code bases, in fact, sometimes when I write code across 20 different files, I say the same thing, but I change my variable name. Over here, the variable name is slightly different than over there, slightly different than over there. But if I had the same variable name everywhere for the same meaning, oh, good. Thank you, Victor Panissa. Glad I got it right. It's so hard for me to know because I like to study human languages too, but other than English, sí hablo español un poquito. Hace muchos años hablaba más. I spoke better Spanish a long time ago. But outside of English and Spanish, I don't do well. I have done Duolingo for a number of languages. I've gone through old versions of the skill tree. I've gone through Irish. I've done a number of lessons in Russian. I've done a fair amount of German. I've looked a tiny bit at Hindi. I've looked a tiny bit at Swahili. I've been through several lessons of Arabic. But the problem with all these things is that when I'm not staying committed to them or using them on a daily basis, I don't remember those languages well. And since I don't remember them well, I just forget them later. One of my rules, actually, a lot of times when I'm looking at a new language or some word I don't know how to pronounce, I think, if this were Spanish, how would I pronounce it? That sometimes gets me in the ballpark for some languages in our world and definitely not for others. Definitely not Germanic languages, for example. Italian, okay. Yeah, I've gone through a lot of the skill tree of Italian as well in Duolingo, but I forget most of the vocabulary. Of course, Italian's not very hard coming from Spanish, but unless I use it, I still forget it anyway. Yeah, Portuguese. I can read Portuguese fairly well. I'm really bad at speaking or understanding spoken Portuguese, if you can imagine that. When American English speakers, when they speak Portuguese, I understand it better than when, say, Brazilians speak Portuguese. Even though it's Americans that learned in Brazil, they still speak in a way I can understand easier than native Portuguese speakers from Brazil, for example. Okay, yeah, definitely on the Spanish thing. Yeah, I'm sure learning Spanish was easy, but internalizing it's completely different. So I'm glad you're having the same experience. Well, at least I feel good about myself if other people have the same experience I do, because I'm maybe not quite as crazy that way, Anyway, cool. So, but I'll still mispronounce lots of names because there's lots and lots of languages out there, and I really don't necessarily know how to pronounce them. Oops. Anyway, okay, back over to here. Let's try to get this done. I'll ignore the comments still for the moment. but I will work on getting these, and I'll sort of call, in a sense, I'll pretend this type annotation here is sort of like a comment. It's sort of metadata, although it has semantic meaning here about my type. And so I'll be effectively referencing it everywhere I give the same variable name. So let's put my changes in here. And presumably this will be a major fail on my generation here. Let's see what happened here. See, I lost my contents. Okay, now I have person and car being generated, but I lost my types. In fact, I lost everything because over here inside of my main, which really should come out of main at some point. This is getting way too long already, especially with the large font size. I probably should not. Well, there's a lot of things I should be doing differently, but minimally, right here, I'm expecting it has to be an annotated assign. But what happens if I do this? Else, maybe I should do logging, logger.warn, warning is the correct one. That's funny. Warn and warning are both inside of Python logging, and warn is the deprecated one, and warning is the correct one to use. And if I think about it, I can understand why they say that, but I always forget, and I almost always have to double check it. Logger.warning. Why are you whining? Logging.debug. What the heck am I doing? That's funny. I was doing that wrong. I thought it was else. Is it default? Can't be default, can it? I thought that it's a case statement. I have to go look up my documentation for pattern matching in Python. I thought it was else for the last one. Python 3.10 pattern matching tutorial. So I'm just quickly, I don't have dark mode on this browser profile. Oh, case underscore. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Case underscore is the right way to do it. I think in Zig, the switch statements end in else, and so I had both in my head recently. That's funny. Case underscore looks like I expect from some of those other languages that would use this as an expression and not as a statement, Python. Okay, whatever. Logger.warning. Unknown or unhandled. Someone was asking earlier about whether there's an exhaustiveness check. And I don't believe that they have exhaustiveness checking. Let me say dump kid equals here. Actually, I just say dump kid. I don't need to worry about that. Okay, what happens if I run this? Oh, I did something wrong there. This is supposed to be logging. Silly me. There we are. Unhandled name. Okay. So I need to get some context already for all these things. I'm only passing the node. I don't have any context. And I could make all these things methods inside of a class. And I just get so tired of object-oriented programming sometimes. So I'll probably just pass around some context for things instead of making it members of a class. I can at least not indent one more level minimally. I'm a whiner. This right here, this is not what I want to be. I do not want to commit my changes. See, here's an example of I made some changes both to my source file, my AHO file, as well as my processing of it. Well, actually, mostly just the source file. And so I'm generating something different. The thing is, I don't want this to be my output. I want to have this to be here. I want to have it look like this, and I want to have this in here. This is what I want it to look like. And since I don't have that yet, I don't want to probably add my changes inside of Git. I'll go back to what was being output here before. So like I said, this is the hint. Oops. This is the tricky thing, well, the little trick I like to use, a hack of outputting it and saving it and keeping it in version control, because then I can just easily diff what changed in my output for my program. And only that person coming by can look at my repo and see what the output is, even if they haven't run my program. So they can see what's supposed to be there. And which is one of the nice things about compiling to human readable languages is because you can read the human readable language. Of course, assembly can be human readable also, but whatever. What are first class comments again? Okay, brought this up before a couple times. So in terms of first class comments, this is the theme given by JT for their langjam. It's of course a ridiculous theme, and I think they know they're making it ridiculous. They have lots of experience. JT has worked on Rust, has worked on like literally the Rust team, has worked on the TypeScript team, has worked on various other languages, has I think a master's degree, coming wrong specifically, but has done research in programming languages. They know programming languages rather well. And they have purposely chosen first-class comments, I think, to try to be edgy in terms of what to do with a language. It is kind of a nightmare. I had this idea of like, I had some ideas what kind of things I want to do with a language, and I'm sort of using some of the same ideas anyway, but it's like, I think it was purposely chosen theme just to stretch people's brains some, because really, first class presumably means it passes around in the language. Yeah, you pass around the language. It has meaning in the language. Yet comments inherently don't have meaning unless you're like talking about annotations or decorators or things, in which case they're not really comments anymore because now they do have meaning. And in fact, JSON, the JSON file format, is one of those you could sort of argue has quote unquote first class comments in the sense it has no comments. And one of the things I really, really hate about JSON is that there's no comments in it. And I'm not going to discuss Doug Crockford's reasoning for why he didn't like them having comments. But so people hack comments in JSON by doing strings. And so I'm going to be using strings for comments here. And I mentioned, I'm not going to go back into all the things, but really quickly, some really bizarre ideas for first class comments could be just really, well, a non-bizarre thing is make it top-notch comments, reinterpret first class as top-notch. Or alternatively, first class comments, the most ridiculous ideas I have are things like, what if the git commit messages that people put on their git commits actually affect the semantics of the program? Or what if you have a Google document that represents your data structure and your template, and your comments you put on the Google document actually create the behavior of how you interpret that document? Those are crazy things that technically you could do. I'm not going there. Maybe someone else has even crazier ideas of what to do. I'm guessing some people will probably do literate programming for this. Instead, I'm trying to do some comments where you can centralize your comments and make comment references, perhaps, that are reusable. Now, officially, JT is going to be judging based on creativity, uniqueness, and fun. And so my guess is the most outlandish ideas are the ones that are going to float to the top. And I'm not expecting or trying to win right now. Yeah. I'm really curious what's going to happen. What crazy, wild ideas people are going to have to do first-class comments. I don't know. But for me, for the moment, what I'm doing is I'm centralizing my variable definition, my variable schemas for use elsewhere, including my doc strings related to those, so I don't have to repeat them. And that's one of my interpretations for first-class comments. Okay, and for people who also are coming in later here, I am using Python's AST module to parse this as Python, but applying whatever semantics I want on top of it. And I'm compiling to Zig. And I don't have a whole lot of time. I don't have 48 hours to spend. So I don't expect to get very far, but I'm having a little bit of fun. It's a chance for me to figure out how live streaming works. Hopefully I'm not making too many mistakes. It's not something I've done before today. Okay. So if I come back to this, I need some context now. And for context, I'm going to be using data classes. I could use Pydantic for those who know what Pydantic is. I'm not going to care that much. Data classes will get my job done for now. So this file keeps getting longer and longer. I really need to separate it out into multiple files at some point if I keep going for any period of time. So if I say class, I'll just call it context for now. And here's how I see, speaking of little annotations or decorators, this is how, like, this is an example of, this might be sort of considered in some ways a first class comment, although it's not really first class. You can't really just reference your decorators. But maybe you could try to do something like that. The thing is, I don't really feel like going that kind of direction with what I'm doing. And maybe I should actually do this as DC for data classes. I really don't like how Python does namespacing at all. Like at all. But I'm going to go with this for now, I think. So dc.dataclass, class context. So minimally, I need to know defaults, which are going to be a dictionary from string to what? I'm going to be awful and have it go from string to string right now. Well, that's really terrible stuff. I'm going to say key equals stir, and I'm going to say type equals stir. Of course, I don't want to have lowercase type. Oh, I hate namespacing in Python. Let me see. So this at least makes it a little bit more readable what I'm trying to do here. This is obviously no new types here. I don't think Python standard type annotation static typing knows what new types are. I'm just using type aliases here to make life a little bit easier to work with. Where key is a string and type is a string. This should still work here. And I already showed earlier that my Py type checking is not working well with my Python 3.10 that I'm using. And so I don't have my Py really operating properly right now. But hey, you know, it'll be what it is. I figure as long as the Python analysis tool and VS Code is giving me reasonable results, I've done okay to have my type checking and type annotations in Python. Okay, so let's go and handle this down here. Let me deal with case name. Actually, not yet. I need to pass in my context everywhere. Blah, 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 blah. Hate this stuff. So one of the things I think is cool about like Objective-C and Swift, and I guess they inherit it from the word is Smalltalk, is that your parameters are named by default. They're named parameters instead of positional parameters. And you have to, and you can even have different external versus internal names on those things. The thing is, I don't like having positional parameters on stuff. So I can say, does context go first, like this? Or does context go last? And I really don't know the answer to that question very well. I'm not getting any type checking in here, am I? You won't believe me that I'm trying to use Python 3.10. And so it's not quite handling it properly. But I want to do pattern matching for walking my abstract syntax trees. That I'm getting, again, freely parsed by the AST module in Python. Okay, so if I pass in context here, I have to figure out whether context goes first or last. And I just really hate that. And so I am going to make these named only arguments on all these parameters now. And this is where I guess if I had made it a class and if I were using self instead of context, then I wouldn't have to worry about it because there's a convention of self is going to be the implicitly passed first parameter. But I don't want to do that. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Yeah, you made a good point. It's similar to self. It probably would be first. So apparently people are agreeing with me right now. So you see, literally Haskelling. Are you, Victor? Are you actually writing Haskell right now? Like you're on your own writing Haskell while the stream go on, or do you mean Haskelling? Meaning we're talking Haskell related stuff occasionally? So we're a little behind on catching the comments sometimes. So since it's not type checking for me properly anymore, let me do context equals something and node equals tree. Text equals context, node equals kid. In fact, so this might look wordy to some people. What I really like, yeah. As soon as I get my language far enough here, I would intend to have some shorthands. In fact, literally like the shorthand. So like in, let me just quickly dump it here. And I know there's some plugins, I forget what they call it, extensions for Haskell that can do some of this in Haskell also. But if I just like say, for example, if I say in Python, in JavaScript or TypeScript, say let a equals name, age, then this really means name, name, and age, right? So I would like it if my name parameters into functions are the same thing. And in fact, I have a whole video planned sometime about relationships between structures and tuples and function parameters and function arguments. And I think there's a whole lot of unnecessary dichotomies in that world out there. It's sort of funny. When I talk on my videos, I tend to be guarded in making explicit value judgments on things. But since I'm going live here, probably a little bit more of things I like and don't like and my value judgments on stuff. Anyway, I'm a huge fan of this because, again, it helps me follow conventions. I'm more likely to name the same things everywhere. If I'm more likely to name the same things everywhere the same way, then I'm more likely to have a consistent code base. Now, there are times when, because of context, you can't have the same names through every single place. But maybe like 50 to 90% of the time, I feel like they ought to have the same names everywhere. And I have to independently pick variable names every time. It seems sort of awkward. So really what I'd like to say, I'd like to have, for example, if I'd called, now this is where I'm going to have to be explicit. If I just said class F context, context should not be positional. Context should be context equals context. And that's what this would mean by default, if everything were named by default. And so it could be shorthand and be named at the same time, and force consistency for cases where consistency is appropriate. Like in this case, I have to have a different name for the kid because I already have something called node here. And I wouldn't want to have the parent and the child both be called node. And so this is one where I want to be explicit anyway. But a lot of times there's no reason I can't just forward variables around in named fashion. And I think that should be the default in lots of languages. Maybe not everyone. Rust, I think, does have structure field name values that automatically fill in, just like JavaScript and TypeScript do. But I don't think it does it for function arguments. If it does, I have missed that. But I think it does do it for struct fields. And I'm a huge fan of that kind of thing. In fact, I would take it a lot further than most people have done it. Like, for example, right here, even like whatever.context should mean context equals whatever.context. But anyway, here we are, passing context around explicitly everywhere. Let's just make sure it still runs, first of all. Apparently it still runs, which means I didn't forget something. So presumably if I left one of these out, okay, I'm a little bit bothered by this point. Oh, not processing class fields anywhere. That's why he. Because I'm currently not there at all. Yeah, see there. So I apparently am passing everything correctly to the right places. Let me take that change and not those changes. Those are changes I don't want to keep. Okay, those are changes I want to fix. Okay, so let's see what's happening here. Blah, blah, blah. Defaults. So the first thing I want to do is do another unhandled thing actually right here. What? Okay, unhandled expr. Okay, so we have not handled our annotated assignment at the top level. Let me see actually what it's doing here. So here we have annotated assignment where we say name, target name, annotation name stir, and then I have an expression which is my string, which will be my comment. The AST module in Python doesn't retain comments anyway, and so any comments I have in Aho for today will be strings, which inherently somewhat makes them first class. Well, it makes it easier to think of them in a first class fashion. And so actually, it could be interesting, by the way. This could be interesting in terms of first class comments, which sort of gets into compile time code. I could say some comment equals, and then could I say some comment down here is the comment that goes with it? I don't know. I have to have somebody probably to indicate that it goes with it. I'm actually biased. I'm biased toward taking over Python's integer division operator as a way to annotate comment references directly on nodes in the AST. But we'll get to that later. Back to this for now. And let's clear it and start over again. Okay, so let's ignore the strings for the moment. So let's do a case expr, case ast.expr. Yay, Python 3.10 pattern matching. Boo that it's not an expression, it's a statement, but you know, whatever. Let's debug this one. I don't want to see it for the moment. I want to deal with those later. And my cat's going to come back in my room. My cat, one of my 4 cats can open doors with they have levers on them. And it was trying to open the door, I think, just now, but then gave up suddenly for some reason. That one is Shadow. And it was trying to get in the room for a second. Okay, so case AST expr. We should be ignoring the comments now. I learned Control L from a comment in my last video. I had always been typing reset my whole life. Okay, so now I'm ignoring those strings for the moment because I want to get to them later. I'll just keep this in mind for now. I want to immediately deal with unassign at the module level. I'm going to say process var default. Context equals context. Node equals kid. Which will be an unassign again. So let's say process var default. And target and annotation. So what we're going to do here, and I'm a little bit abusive. These annotations do not have to be names. I have just presumed only to be names. I have hacked stuff that will crash if I use the wrong, and I don't think I need this anymore. Well, I'll leave it as debug, whatever. If I use the wrong stuff inside of my source here. I am being very quick and hackish because A, I'm not really a fast programmer necessarily anyway, and B, I only have so much time to spend on this. In fact, what time is it? Getting to 9 o'clock. I might be willing to stay here till about 10 my time. I'm in Pacific time zone for US. Anyway, so let me see here. I'll just clear that from I don't care enough. So let's say context dot defaults target dot id equals annotation dot id. Okay, so presumably I've stored that as a default. And I'm being super hackish. I'm not going to get very deep into this language right now. And my language actually doesn't do any computation at all. I'm only doing data modeling in my language so far, which is why the main always are the same stupid thing. Let's see if I ever get out of data modeling and ever get into actual computation. We'll see. So at this point, I need to deal with expers. See this exper, if it's not got an annotation on it like this, it's considered to be an expression. By the way, one really cool thing in here is, I told you the other day, it can parse things like this. Unpack operation, a lot in this context. In Python Python semantics is not allowed. But notice, well, this right here is Pylance anyway. It's not Python. That actually is parsable in AST. It'll parse it syntax-wise. It just has semantic errors in Python, which is interesting. And the consequence is that I could use this for expanding some structs inside of other structs as sort of mix-ins. That would be a fun thing to do. But for the moment, I'm not going to worry about that. But arbitrary expressions can go here. But I'm only going to deal with expressions that are names. Let me see. So process module, not process module, process class def. I deal with expressions. Case ast dot exper. And I'm going to extract the value immediately out of it. This is the first time I've extracted something. One thing I found lame, though, is that type any. Seriously, Pylance? Well, I guess pattern matching is new. It should be able to know that value is of type, presumably AST node. But it doesn't do that. The name of the argument is have five cats. Wow, yeah, you beat me. I'm guessing 5 is a reference to cats. I was a little bit late on noticing the comment. Yeah, we somehow ended up with 4. We had 2 cats and we picked up 2 strays from off the street. That was some years ago for the 2 strays, so went up to 4. The original 2 were like over 10 years old by now, I think. So see how that goes. But they're healthy still, but they're not as sprightly as they used to be. Let me see. So now we have a value, which presumably is an expression. Now I'm going to pretend that it has to be an expression right now. Sorry, it has to be a name. I'm going to pretend my only expression is a name for the moment. I'll be doing something fancier later. I'll say process class field name. So this is where it gets awkward. I'm passing in an annotated assign. Let me just do this. Actually, I wonder if I could hack this. The only thing I really hate about Python is the lack of scope. It drives me crazy. I presume that my scope here is alive here also, and I can use A, although it would not have been assigned to. But I'm presuming it's technically in scope, just because Python. Okay, anyway. Drive me crazy. So let's see what we have here. Let's make an annotated assign. Can I make an anassign this easily? Please say I can just pass in stuff. I don't know if I can or can't. What happens if I do this? Will it freak out on me? I'm going to say target equals value.id, even though I never said value was a name. Forget how to assert that it's of a particular type. Can I say assert is instance value ast.name? Does this help the annotator go? Oh, it does know it's a name now. He, he, he. Okay. Thank you, Pylance. So now this works. But I don't know if I can create an annotated assignment like this. I haven't used the AST library before, not in any kind of serious way. So I'm inventing how to use it. I'm hoping it works. And the other thing I need to pass in is the annotation. Let me say, oh, I just love alphabetical order on my things. I'm crazy. Annotation equals context.defaults. Oh, I need to make these names though, don't I? Oh, dearies. This is lame. Wait, it already was a name, silly me. Target equals value. I haven't even verified it doesn't work at all yet. Is t dot name let's do this. Defaults value.id. And then we'll say context equals context, and we'll say node equals an assign. Does this work at all? Nope, didn't work. What is it? Context equals dot dot dot. He he he. I didn't make a context. Let's say, hey, default. Okay, let's see. Context equals, what was it? Context equals context. Context. That sure didn't work. Oh, right. Blah, blah, blah. I forget. For the data classes, you can't have mutable defaults because of how Python does default values. I don't want to deal with that. What a bother. I have to go look at the documentation on the data classes library, data classes module. I'm just going to do this instead. Something happened. What happened? Ha ha ha! It worked. Look at that. So I have now defaulted my variable types. Sweetnesses. Okay. So I am now totally hacking, processing the var default there. I have created a fake annotated, well, an on-the-fly annotated assignment thing that pretended I had in the first place, and passed that along. And I properly extracted out the value from my expression. Yay for pattern matching. I've said on my Twitter account that I think that pattern matching should be considered a requirement really in languages going forward. Like at least like almost all of the top languages have or are getting pattern matching. And if you don't have pattern matching, it's not like it's gonna be like, oh, I didn't have that luxury. It's gonna be more like I don't have this expected behavior that all the languages are expected to have. I mean, I really think every language that wants to be modern and up to date needs to have pattern matching in it going forward. That's my opinion on pattern matching, including destructuring in your pattern matching. Anyway, so I am now creating defaults for my variable types, and therefore trying to impose the idea of conventions to be used throughout the program. I notice I'm actually not clear on the comments yet. Maybe I should actually do comments next, just for the sake of doing anything with the theme today, which is comment related. So I'll deal with that in a minute. Like I said, really, this could be, I could be new typing these things instead of associating comments with the variable conventions, but I'm going this direction for tonight anyway. Let me see. Default var types. Let me push that. Okay. What's next? I probably should, like I said, I probably should do those comments next, just so I do something with comments. Yeah, I should do something with comments before I'm done. But I'm guessing this won't parse. Let me quickly see if this would parse. I'm guessing it won't. Blah. I'm guessing AST will complain about this. Says, where's the actual error message? Bin op has no attribute ID. Oh, that's cute. It considered this to be a modifier on this. So this, saw this as a full expression here. That's interesting. So I'm considering using / as a way to reference a compile time variable that contains your comments. So I can have quote unquote first class comments. That's what I'm considering doing. I'm considering taking over the integer division operator of Python 3 to do comments instead. Because I don't want an integer division operator anyway. And it looks like comments from some other languages. So I'm planning to hijack that at some point. Yeah, and Travis, you're right. I could use yes, I could use default factory for mutable defaults. I'd have to go look up how to do that. And I don't feel like looking it up right now. I was being lazy. Cricket, my compiling is yes, I'm compiling Python syntax, not Python semantics. I'm using the Python AST module to parse Python, and then I am converting that. I'm compiling that to Zig, is what I'm doing right now. And just because I like code that's small and runs native and stuff, and Zig run is way easier to use than C compiler, really, sometimes. Even though Zig is still not stable as a language. But when Zig gets stable, I'm all over using it instead of C. And I use it sometimes instead of C now anyway, just because, I never agree with all of anybody's decisions about a language. Nobody agrees with everybody else on everything. But when it comes to Zig versus C, really, yeah, the only thing keeping Zig from being better than C is just that it's not stable yet. Hasn't hit 1.0. When that happens, it'll be great to use. Anyway. Okay. And then just some nameless, I'm not sure what you're looking at. Okay, you're looking at, and don't worry about being late. I didn't announce in advance that I was doing this. I wasn't sure what time I could get started. I wasn't 100% convinced I was going to do it because streaming's a new thing for me. But yeah, I felt like coming in here. And by the way, as far as other alternatives to C exist as well, Odin is another great one. I'm hoping to talk to Ginger Bill sometime. Yeah, the having to rewrite chunks of Zig. Yeah, I'm really looking forward. Now, it's funny. I'm actually really glad Zig has async and Zig has suspend and resume. That's really useful. Especially it can be really useful as a compilation target with suspend and resume. You could do some great things there with like coroutines and stuff. I'm glad for them rewriting the compiler, self-hosting it in Zig. Those are all things that I think are great. It's just I just want to see it stabilize, So I'm rooting for it to stabilize, even though I also like what they're doing with it overall. I'd make some different decisions because everybody makes different decisions, but I'm looking forward to the day when Zig is 1.0. Anyway, back over to Ajo. And for those who missed that, ajo is Spanish for garlic. It just seemed like a nice word. I like garlic anyway. Who doesn't like garlic? And you can see here, that my stuff crashed this time because I wasn't able to parse it properly. Let me see. Okay. So back over here to this crazy stuff. And where I'm using Python syntax, but not Python semantics for this ajo language. And not that I love Python syntax, I really don't, but it's convenient for the moment. And I have a convenient built-in parser in Python AST. So convenience is trumping perfection at the moment. Another quick parser could have done is something Lisp styled, which I didn't do because I like syntax so much apparently. So here I am back in main, and I should grab my comments. So the thing is, I don't have any tree relationship here. So let me get back to actually warning on these missing things here. I have annotated assignment nodes followed by expression nodes. There is no tree structure in AST to link these two things. Although there's some not quite formalized convention, like in your field definitions in your classes, that the docstring should follow the field definition. And some libraries support that. And so I'm going to use the same style here. In fact, I think in general, we've sort of gotten ourselves into a weird world where we expect to put like, doc strings up here. My doc string, my doc comment is before my thing. I think this is because we've had terrible structuring in our programming languages. In English and in other languages, I know you put your title first and then you put your content, which is why in some ways something I do like about Python, and I complain about lots of things about Python, ones I do like is that your doc strings usually go after the name of the thing you're documenting. So you have your title first, then your content instead of your content first, and then your title. Anyway, I'm going to maintain this here, but I'll have to just remember the most recent assignment that I had, a most recent annotated assignment, so that I can tie the doc back up into it, which is going to be awkward, especially because I'm generating first. This is where I have to probably start caring more, don't I? Blech. I was outputting as I went. And I'm going to have to stop outputting as I go here because I'll have to have one stage that builds new things. That builds some more context about things. And then afterward I can generate. Because the issue here is that I want, just because I'll try to, it doesn't really matter where these doc strings go, but I'm going to put doc strings here in advance in Zig fashion, the same way like lots of other languages do it. Doc goes here. But it means I can't just output as I'm processing the syntax tree because I don't have the information in advance, which means I'm going to have to start doing something a little more effort if I'm going to make this happen. And for kicks, let's, instead of a name for a car, let's give it a model string. So the Zig now has this coming out. So we can show that we can override explicit types, or we can use a default type as necessary. And in fact, just to prove something else, let's say it'd be a terrible idea. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Let's do a different thing. Detail, age, float. Probably, I have no idea. I was already surprised at Zig parsing int and stir earlier. Although by default, Zig's going to ignore these things if I don't use them, which is why I temporarily hacked this thing to reference stuff, and it seemed to be coping with stir and int, which is interesting. I wasn't expecting that. Maybe cope with float, I don't know. But I want to just prove that I can override the default. The default is int. Now I'm going to override it to float here. Let's see. So detail is float, and the Zig output does have age as float instead of age as int. So it didn't use the default because I explicitly overrode it. So let me go and take those changes for now because that's an interesting change. So I can either have a default referencing what was out here, or I can explicitly give something that wasn't defined anywhere, or I can override the default for my types. And now I've got to think harder. I've been hacking everything so much here. Now I need to be able to say, I could make it a multi-pass thing. I could do, well, I don't think I'm trying lenses / optics type stuff. I think I'm going to do a pass. Let me see something quickly here. I'm going to logger.info. Control L, start over again. Annotated assignment. I don't see any indication that annotated assignment even has a place to store, even a place to store a document or a comment. Let me see if that's really true. Let me actually look at the source here. I've got value, simple, annotation. I'm not sure what simple even means. I'm not sure that would mean. Oh well. But target annotation value can imagine, but there's no place to store a comment with it. AST by default has line number and column offset. So I could be using these, by the way, to give detailed error messages if I had error reporting on my language, which I don't. And I probably won't bother with it. So what I think I'm going to have to do is invent my own kind of node that they don't have. So that I can have a comment that goes along with things. And I really got to split up my files here sometime. Yeah, as far as the comment above the function signature, got a comment from Victor there. Victor, however you would say it in Italian. Let's go with Victor for now, with Panissa for surname. The idea of comment before the function signature, I think we've gotten to where we just have gotten used to it. I could be wrong though. Maybe there's more logic to it than I imagine. I'm inclined to believe it sort of organically evolved that way and we've gotten used to it. And I'm not going to judge the people for different things. There's a million reasons to do different things in the world. I'm just sort of harping on my own things. In my normal videos, I don't dump opinions very much, but it's just much easier to dump opinion when I'm just on the fly like this. Doesn't mean my opinion is the only way to look at things by any means. So I need some kind of data class for var definitions. And I'll probably start putting things into a different putting things into a different file at some point here. I think I'm getting tired. I think it'll be time for me to give up pretty soon. Class. I'll call it var def for now. Change for definition or default or something. And I'm going to have. Let me just simplify this down. Although maybe it's worth keeping other things there because those AST nodes include things like the column and line number. Maybe I should use their things. I don't know. So I'd have to have target, which is, I'm going to hack it to name only, ast.name, and I'm going to hack in an annotation, which is an ast.name. And I'm going to hack in a string only probably for the documentation. Doc string. Really, I all ast.asts. If I have an arbitrary AST node for everything, then it means I can even store broken trees, which might be useful sometimes until I get to something in a validation phase, which I'm not going to do any validation or error checking in any of this. That's presumably something you could do. And I really like things in alphabetical order. I'm so weird. When I see lists of stuff, I want them in alphabetical order. If I can do alphabetical order, there we are. I'm just afraid if things get longer and longer, I'll have trouble remembering which order they should be in if they're not alphabetical. So somehow I've got to convert back to back. Oh, I could totally hack it. Maybe I should hack it for the moment. Here's what I mean by hack it. Where am I at? Class def. This is awful. Don't write your code like this. Don't do what I'm doing. I'm just trying to hack because I just want to get it done. And I'm tired. Well, I don't want to move forward and I'm tired. So kid index. Now I could say, now this body I think is a list. It is a list, which means I can check the size in advance. So I can say things like, when I get to this annotation assignment or this expression, actually, first I'm going to store it first anyway. Let me do this. It's a little bit redundant to have the dictionary from the key to something that already includes the name all over again, which would be the target here, except that this is just convenient at the moment. Keeping it more structured than if I were to keep the document, the doc string and the other information about it separate, and I will just have a redundant thing inside of there, and I'll just live with that for the moment. So let me come down to the context here. Where would the context go? And I can say that the context defaults target ID is going to be equal to a var def, blech. Now I'll be lazy. Laziness back in place again. I'm being lazy. So let's go context defaults. Let me rename this default types. Let's see if it got it everywhere. Defaults. Oh, it got it everywhere. Thank you, Python extension and PyLance. It figured out what I meant. Very nice. That's the kind of nice things you get from static typing. Okay. Yay for static typing in Python. Oh yeah, good point on the listening to alternative perspectives. Yeah, so most of my videos, like I said, I try not to do a bunch of opinion drops in my videos. I try to I don't try to opinion dumping. I try to, well, of course, the thing is, what I choose to cover and to focus on obviously is affected by my opinions and my worldviews. But the when I try to address what a language is doing, I don't try to address it in terms of, I try to at least to some extent understand where they're coming from and express it in that way. So it forces me to be exposed to things in ways that I wouldn't if I were just trying to achieve my own ends. And so yeah, I definitely agree on the listening to opinions topic. Anyway. Okay, so we have default types. Let's do default docs. This is a really horrible, in my opinion, this is just terrible organization. I'm really not happy with this. So the thing is, we need to say for process var default. You know, I think I'm going to do it this way. I'll go back to this. Maybe I'll do this also. Kid index. There's another hack I can do. One of the hacks you can do in Python, instead of tracking the index, if you want to look just one thing ahead every time, have the ability to just peek one thing ahead. Instead of using an index and checking as I'm going, I could zip the body with itself offset by 1. But I would have to make sure that I add a stupid bogus thing on the end of it that I could ignore for the last pairing of the last thing with a nothing that follows. I'll just stick to enumerate for now. They're gonna have their pros and cons. Kid index. Okay, so I need to say down here, if kid index, now what did I just do? I didn't mean to do that. Go away. Okay. If kid index is less than len node body minus 1, this is junk. I hate myself for writing code like this. Less than len node body minus 1, then I'm going to say next kid equals node.body kid index plus 1. And I can say let's just go with sibling instead of next kid. Sibling. Something's going to be next sibling instead of previous sibling by default because I said so. Which I could possibly, if I were using the AHO language I'm making right now, then I could have defined sibling elsewhere as by default referring to the next sibling instead of previous sibling. I can say sibling equals sibling, but then I have the issue of what happens if this weren't the case. If I say sibling equals none. And I know there's the ternary if else in Python, but I'm not going to deal with it right now because it's not as easy to read when things get long. If only Python cared about expressions. We don't have to worry about this nonsense. Okay. Let's go down here again. What else does it actually say? Let me just default it. Multiple assignment to the same variable. No. Okay. I'm also going to say further if I could possibly be using match statement again, except that the match statement is going to have to go too deep on all of everything. I don't feel like going too deep. So I'll just say if is not is instance sibling. Actually, I will do it actually. Match sibling case ast.expr. Was it value? Sibling I'll change that later. And in fact, I don't think Black would wrap this for me yet. Black is not working on Python 3.10. It's a code formatter for those who aren't familiar with Black. I'm just going to wrap it and make it lengthwise. Sometimes I think it's sort of funny. Going back to the issue of if I need to do a doc string in Python, I'm going to repeat all my variables on independent lines later instead of my doc string. But for some reason, I can't just make them independent lines to start with because I have to have it shorter and terser. Life's weird. I'm starting to think that you should always have your variables listed out lengthwise and not in line. Anyway, so here we are. Sibling's not being used. It's still run, or did I break something? Oh, it breaks right now. Required positional argument default docs. Down here. I should probably do the default thing that was being recommended earlier. I have to go look it up again how to do it though. I'll deal with it later. I can't add no body explicit. Okay. Yeah, this shows I'm getting tired. How about that? Okay. So let's put that in and let's print wow, so many overlays. Dump sibling. Where did sibling go? Blech you. Where'd sibling go? Shouldn't it have a sibling somewhere? What's the deal? I don't want print, it's only me. That's one of my problems. That's my problems. I'm not logging it. There we are. Sibling equals constant value. So it is value, okay, and that's the value is just a string. Pass, so nothing to do in this case. And if it's not the case, okay. So here's doc equals none. I don't want to say the values of type string. I'm not sure the way to say that, but I'll pretend that it's always going to be a string. Let's just for kicks say assert is instance value string. There might be a way to check that string in the pattern matching. I'm not sure if there is or isn't. I'll have to look it up at a different time. Sibling equals whatever. I don't care about this anymore. Doc equals value. So doc is none. I'll probably bring this right into spot here now. It'll say I'll match the next one, and if it's an expression, I'll get the value out, and the doc will be the value. This is probably not really good. Surely I should say differently. Instead of assert, I should say if it's a string. Oh, actually it says to be constant for silly me. Value should be a constant. Let's just do this. Ast dot constant. And we'll presume it has to be a string. Let's go back to the assert value dot value is instance value Man, I love that Pylance knows that in this context, that value has to be a constant because of the context. Then we're going to say doc has to be a string. So if we have a constant, and we could be doing matches further down, but I, just all that nesting, blah, blah, blah. Doc equals value dot value. Assert is instance doc stir. And I can say doc equals doc, which is not the right thing. Doc string. Actually, I can let it doc even. Default docs target ID equals doc. If doc is not none. There's some way of knowing when I can ignore it. Let's do a hack here. Will this hack get the job done? Aha, take that. So I'm cleaning out my doc when I get to the next thing. I could even just play skip perhaps. Might be a little bit smarter than I've done here. Have sort of a contextualized skip. It says skip the next thing. Okay, so when it comes down over here to process class field, I can say doc equals context.defaultDocs.get target.id. Now the thing is, I should be allowing the idea of overriding the document for the current location, but I need to do this instead. Because I'm just hacking, I'm only dealing with the default case. If doc is not none, print now, of course, notice I should be escaping some of these things. I haven't worried about whether these IDs are compatible between Zig and Python. It's something I'm just ignoring for the moment. Doc. Let's see if this worked. There it is. Let's see what they have. Oh, I need to strip those things and dedent them automatically. At the start, though. Imagine that. Okay. Let's fix that first. Let's get text wrap. Oh, text wrap again. Text wrap.dedent.strip. But I probably still need to provide multi-lines. For the moment, it's probably going to work, but I should probably support multi-line stuff. Sweet. Okay. So now that my doc strings can be repeated out over here in Zigville, it means that in a sense I've at least somewhat elevated the status of my comments. So I have a comment here. I have a comment here that gets replicated by reference any place it's being used. I probably, if someone has overridden the type, I might not ought to automatically carry over the doc string. I'll deal with that at some future point. So that's this case here. The probably case where I probably should not have carried it over because it doesn't really match properly for the documentation. But this is, at least I've done something with comments now, and something unusual with comments that in some ways has elevated their status and ability to reference them around different parts of your program. So it's slightly closer to first class comments. Insert default docs. Now, of course, it's sort of uninteresting in the sense of what it really wanted to do. I mean, if this is an intermediate format that just goes straight to native, then it doesn't really matter whether I put the comments around. In some sense, actually, what I really want to do is just make sure that if I had like a language server, that these comments were being surfaced to the user in appropriate places. And so the fact that I'm repeating them out as doc comments into Zig is basically just proxy for what ought to be happening in the tooling for Aho. And that might be all I'm going to do for tonight. It's getting a little bit late for me. So I'll probably sign off. Like, so I'll really quickly mention though, what I'd like to be able to do, say I had a main in here somewhere. By the way, I'd like to do things like this, which I don't have. Person defaults to person. This is where, again, if I had type names and variable names the same, I wouldn't have to say these things. Because half the time I'm going to have this kind of relationship, I think. But say if these were nice to say def main, which this is going to ignore for the moment. Person, and I should have this elsewhere. Persons are persons by default. So I should be able to say things like, person equals, of course, this is also going to be inferred in context. So this is how I create a person. I don't know. I hadn't thought about how I create. Actually, it might be one of the ways to create an object. But presumably you'd want to be able to support things like this. And right here, I guess we could infer locally anyway. But it's possible that, I could have nested things like, we could say, for example, driver is a person. And then down over here we have driver. Except, of course, I won't be able to support the nested stuff properly. I don't think. Maybe it'd work. Could be fun. So let me see what happens if I do that. Would this actually work? What happens if I run this? And there's driver person, which is interesting. Let me actually, I'll keep that change in the test. And I have this whole main function that's not being used. I can't remember where I was going to go with that originally, but I was imagining still that you'd have local variables that, local variables aren't quite as interesting, since local variables are almost always going to be given a value, especially if you're being approximately functional in your programming. So maybe local type default doesn't matter, but if I had functions that had to receive values like this, because to me actually function parameters and structures are approximately the same thing, as I was mentioning sometime earlier in the stream. But anyway, I will leave this for the moment, but I'd like to say things like, for example, car equals, let's do this, load person. This is a proxy for some function I don't have. And load car, and I'm going to do combined age, which has no meaning in life really. It's going to be equal to person.age plus car.age. And what I want to be able to do is do things like this that say doc age sum. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is do things like this, where this right here references a comment that I have elsewhere that specifically targets a node in the AST, such that it'd be possible to add comments relative to a particular thing. And ideally, the editor you have would be able to pop up like, a nice markdown editor here with live preview of your markdown. And this doc age sum will go down here somewhere. Doc age sum equals really does it make sense to add these ages? And presuming we're doing markdown, really does it make sense to add these ages? So presumably you could do things like this. Does it actually parse still? It does parse in this warning about all things that didn't get generated. Let's take it anyway. So I'm imagining that there's a world where you can do this kind of stuff. And your editor is a nice experience. And so you can arbitrarily dump comments to your references to your comments. Where this right here is normally an integer division operator in Python, but I'd use it for a comment reference in my Aho here. And so this could presumably, you could, whatever nesting inside of your expression, you could just arbitrarily say, I want to document this expression, and be able to just fill in arbitrary documentation, and your editor would make it awesome for you. So I'm imagining that this would be a cool direction to go down things. And again, this right here, when exporting to Zig, it doesn't matter as much where this comment goes. But the fact that I'm exporting it to Zig at all is just a proxy for the editor exporting this. So I'm trying to make it so I have linguistic support. And the reason why, again, why I'd want this nice documentation sitting here, because I'm really not a fan of literate programming, because for me, the code is easiest to read as code. And I guess I'm a code first and not document first. Maybe that makes me a broken person. I don't know. But this provides the ability to write code, but then arbitrarily just detail at length anything you care about, any particular part of your code, without having to have lengthy comments in place here. And like I said, sometimes people do like a comment folding over here in your editor is one way, just like we have folding here. You do comment folding also. And that's one way to have an editor. Where are we at? I'd like you to mouse over and tell me the stuff. Just tell me what's in there. VS Code doesn't do that, really. I don't use folding very much. But to me, this is sort of like an alternative to folding that allows you to just really just put that somewhere else. But it still gets version controlled. It still goes in your version control. It's still nice diffing abilities. But it lets you provide a good editor experience where you don't have a bunch of junk inline inside of your code here. Anyway, let me go on ahead and I'm going to make another commit on added junk to example. I'm going to do one more fix though, because one thing bothered me here. Here's more text. So I have a multi-line comment here. This is totally going to break. There it is. See, Zig broke because I'm not doing the multi-line things properly. Let me fix just that one thing and then I'll call it done for tonight. And I may or may not get back to it tomorrow. I'm finding that when I'm hacking fast, I'm easily doing a very bad job of my code. Nothing to be proud of here. This right here ought to really be handled out to separate function, but I'm going to still with it in place. But also all this print stuff really ought to be effectively, like I mentioned earlier, sort of writer monad-ish. It ought to be funneling to something else that gathers it and collects it. And in fact, it really ought to be doing multiple passes where I do different levels of analysis along the way instead of just immediately outputting everything. But again, this is super hack mode. Let's say for line in doc.split lines. The split lines include, line breaks are not included unless keep ends is given and true. That's not what I'm doing. Okay. Let's see if this works now. ¿Qué pasó? Okay, that's better now. Okay, well, fix multi-line comments. Oh, I missed a bunch of stuff. Yeah, thanks, Victor. I guess you might have already left by now. Okay, looks like I have 10 people still online right now. I am going to be signing off, I think, now. I'll probably have this up later on my... Oh, now in your repeatable comment, you can make it a template like... Yeah, actually, I thought about that. So the template thing is, again, it's sort of it becomes. Yeah, I'll discuss this with you before I sign off. I was thinking about that earlier. In a sense, you basically have compile time code execution that lets you, templatize your comments, which goes back to, I don't know if you were here when I was looking at the NumPy documentation, where they had similar, but not the same. Yeah, I'm tired. I'm so tired. And if you're in Italy, then I'm guessing you didn't get much sleep or something. I don't know. I don't know. It is in Italy, but if you could use the templatized strings for your comments, that's another use for, again, the first class comments and the ability to, again, it's sort of like a compile time code templating system for generating appropriate comments. And I totally think that could be a useful thing to do if I go further down this path. Now, what I've done here is I'm trying to be relatively practical as opposed to just having fun. And I think JT is looking more for fun with this. I think there's several reasons, including the fact I'm not going to get much more done, that I don't have any plan to, actually compete on the winning level on stuff. But I was just having fun thinking through some ideas that I was having relative to both the theme today that was given by JT, as well as some thoughts I've had on languages otherwise, and try to put some of the two things together. Oh, you're on Brazil, okay. Still, yeah. South America. In my mind, sometimes South America and North America are aligned, but it's absolutely not true. South America is like way off east of North America. Yeah. Anyway, definitely feel free to move on. I'm gonna go too. If anybody else have any last minute questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm gonna sign off here. In any case, thanks for joining, everybody, and hope it was at least a little bit of fun here. Bye, y'all.